Every time we get new commanders in Rise of Kingdoms, I update my list for what the newest and greatest combinations of open field commanders are, whether you're bringing 3 marches, 5 marches, or all the way up to 7. These are my recommendations for the open field, and I will point out that I have Wallace maxed on 2 accounts, which is really crazy. I have been open field fighting with him. I have been very happy with his performance. I also have Skippy A, and we've done some testing, but let's jump into Tier Maker and start to break down these lists and use the timestamps to jump to whichever part you want. You want to see the combos? Check it out. You want the talents? Jump to those toward the end. Now, if you're bringing only 3 marches in the open field, which is what newer players are starting at, my recommendation is that you go for 1 march of each troop type: infantry, archers, and cavalry. And whether you go for the arch formation or the wedge formation, you're going to get a lot of armaments that will be valuable to multiple troop types just going for the 1 formation. So we're going to start with infantry as the pairing we're going to talk about. And obviously everybody's wondering, should you pair Wallace with Liu Che as like the one best infantry march? And I think if you're bringing multiple infantry marches, it is the way to go. But of course, also Alexander the Great with his relic is actually just insane with Liu Che. So if you already have that, it's very good. You don't need to upgrade to Wallace if you don't want to or you want to hoard up sculptures. In addition, I will point out that obviously Skippy Prime is very good. If you're bringing 1 infantry march, you can use Liu Che and Skippy Prime together. So any of those combinations I think is going to be insane for your 1 infantry march. I couldn't tell you which I think is the very best, but I suspect that the Skippy Prime with Liu Che would be it. Now, that said, I'm going to run multiple infantry marches, and we'll get there in just a bit. So those are all amazing options for your starting march with infantry. From there, the archers are very straightforward. This is very much unchanged. It's very uncontroversial. Use Hermann Prime as the secondary, Zhuge Liang as the primary, and like, bro. This march just does great. I don't know how this will get replaced. From here, we need to add cavalry, and I think the somewhat uncontroversial pick is still Nevsky and Joan, although both of those commanders are just getting extremely old, and I thought I pulled forward the Joan. Like, look at all these commanders we have to choose from, man. There's just so dang many of them. There's the Joan. I found her, all right? Nevsky and Joan. This gives you infantry, it gives you archers, it gives you cavalry. This is your foundation. So from here, if you're adding a 4th or getting to 5 marches, what do I think you should do? Well, I think the way to go at this point is ideally only 1 archer march. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is, but let's start by making the combinations. So we're going to scoot these actually down a little bit, make some space. And if you were to have 2 infantry combos, I think this is where you bring in the Guan Yu, pair with Skippy, and then you use either Wallace with Liu Che or Liu Che with Alexander the Great. Very straightforward, very powerful. The AoE silence from your Guan is just very, very powerful. They just got a museum buff. He's still meta in Canyon, which is generally a good sign that for team fights, he can do very powerful things. Yeah, I mean, I think those are your infantry combos. Now, archers, like I mentioned, we probably only want to have 1 of those. So actually, I'm going to bump those down a little bit further, scoot these cavalry up. And for your cavalry, you have a couple choices here. Huo will be the primary, and you can use either William, or you could use Belisarius Prime. And a lot of people will just stick with the William. There are other commanders you can use like Mehmed and bring them into the mix if you didn't have some of these other commanders, or you were looking for an easier starting point. For example, you're newer to the game, you might use Minamoto somewhere in this lineup. In fact, you may recall that the way I ran this last KVK that I was in was to actually go Joan with Belly, scrap the Huo, and then use Nevsky with William. So there are a lot of ways that you can mix and match your cavalry, and I won't tell you which is the absolute best. Most people don't have Belisarius Prime anyways. I think most people are going to go Nevsky Joan, which I'll put back here for simplicity's sake. They'll use the Huo with William. They'll probably bench the Belisarius Prime. If you're a whale, you want Belisarius Prime in that lineup. So there would be 5 marches. And I think this is a really good 5 march setup. Like, really good. But if you're going to 6 marches, or if you're going to make 5 marches and you would prefer to have archers, what would that 6th march or archer march be? And if you're going to add more archers, I think you have some very good options. One is to use Boudica with Ashurbanipal. Another is to use Ashurbanipal with Esong. And another is to use Ashurbanipal with Nebu. All of those are very good options. They give you lots of AoE, but Zhuge and Hermann Prime, you keep them together, baby. When you get to 7 marches, things get a little bit wacky with infantry, and there's still a lot that we need to figure out. But I think one thing you could do, I'm going to bump these down a little bit just to make some space. But I think what you could do is you could bring in Skippy A. Okay. And if you're going to bring in Skippy A, I think you pair him with William Wallace. That's like the only way that's going to work. Now, already you can see we've got 3 infantry combos that are pretty legit. If you have the arch stuff, I think this is actually a super legit way to go. The other commander that you could bring in is Gorgo. And I've got her earmarked here, but I'm not going to bring her in. You could put her with Liu Che as an example, but I think Alexander the Great these days is cooking. So that is probably the way I would run 3 infantry, if that's what you were up to. But most people, they're not up to 3 infantry, man. We can take those off the board, kind of rearrange those back the way we had them, all right? What a lot of people are probably going to be doing is 3 cavalry. Now, I reached out, like I said, to Chisgule to get his opinion on this, and for 3 cavalry, his recommendation is that you use Nevsky and Joan together, you use Huo and Belly together, and for your additional Cav March, you can use XY with William, and I need to go retrieve XY from the old garbage bin over here. GG's. XY with William will be one way to do it. Another way you could do it is to mix and match a little bit. So you could do XY with Nevsky, you could do Joan with William, and that would be another way to sort of slice it up and give a lot more tankiness to your XY, which I think that is probably the play if you're going to use XY. Alternatively, you can take XY out of the picture. You could bring Justinian in. If you're bringing Justinian in, you could run it like this. Okay, Justinian and William as an example. But that is how you can get 3 cavalry in there. You're looking at XY as an option to bring in. You're looking at Justinian as an option to bring in. And of course, if you had like Honda Tadakatsu or you needed to use your Mehmed, those are choices you could take off the bench as well. Now, this brings us to what it would look like if you had 3 archers. And 3 archers is actually kind of an interesting one, to be honest. I'm not where I used to be with archers. I used to feel like there's just like so many things you could do. But the challenge with Zhuge Liang and Hermann Prime is their power level is just way higher, in my opinion, than pretty much all the other stuff. But if you're running 3, when I talked with Chisgule, he recommended this, and I think this is pretty good. You can use Ash with Esong for some fat AoE. You use Boudica with Nebu for March speed and fat AoE paired with Boudica's single target. And then, of course, you keep Zhuge Liang and Hermann Prime together. But that is how you can get to 7 marches, whether you prefer infantry, cavalry, or archers. And if you want 4 of any one troop type, you're a lunatic. It's out of the meta. Do not do this. The other thing you could, of course, do is use ranged marches, but the problem is that you would be unwinding investment you've made into your existing 7 march configurations. So if you wanted a commander pairing that operates differently than everything else you've got, you would be looking at the sort of ranged commanders and different ways that you could combine those to get some pretty big value. Okay, and I think you can get amazing value with range marches, but there's no unwinding the sort of work you've put into 7 marches already. So if you already went down that path, I don't know, I'm just going to stick with it. There's already so much to do to progress each march down that path that like, and you don't get back what you invested. So like, I can't go backwards and do anything else, I feel, without eating just an absolutely astronomical cost that for me is, it just feels like too much. So that's what I'm recommending. Okay. My personal recommendation right now, I don't know if the infantry ball is the best or the cavalry ball or the archer ball. I honestly feel like they're pretty equivalent. Like whatever you use as your 3X, they're all pretty good. With all that out of the way, we can actually get a look now at the talents. For Liu Che, an uncontroversial build, you get martial mastery, you get effortless, I really like fight to the death. I want the march speed from fleet of foot. You take hold the line, and you take strong of body. All this is better than getting the talent points over here, elite soldiers. That's just not where it's at. If you are going to use Guan Yu as a primary, which I would recommend, this is the build that I've really locked in on and have been using for a long time. Full skill tree, with the exception of the side talents. Again, hold the line and strong of body, and just a little bit of march speed off to the side. If what you're doing is using William Wallace as the primary, this is the build I've been running with. It's full smite and has been fantastic. You get the Thunderous Smite, you must get Pack a Punch, and as you can see, there's a pattern here. I really like Hold the Line and Strong of Body. If I were doing this again, I might consider dropping some points out of the Smite tree and putting them into some of the march speed. Like, I would strongly consider a build that looks maybe more like this one, quite frankly, because I really feel like, depending on what combo you're using, I want more march speed. Infantry are just a little slow. So, you know, one of these two builds is kind of where I'm at for your infantry here. And those builds also apply if you're looking at Skippy Emilianus. Okay, same ones for the open field is what you'd use on your William and your Skippy. Oh, and on the topic of Skippy, if you're using the original Skippy Prime as your primary, you get 2 points in Rejuvenate, 3 points in Emergency Protection, swing on up over here for the Hold the Line, Strong of Body, and just a bunch of stats and march speed. Very powerful build, again, extremely uncontroversial. If you want to get a look at some cavalry talents, and who doesn't, this is like the tune-up session over here with Chisgule Gaming, all right? We switch things off of infantry. We go to cavalry. Your Nevsky build, your Huo build, basically any Cav skill tree commander, this is it. Max out the skill tree with the exception of the side talents. You get the points over here for Emblazoned Shield, and I like the extra rage and Undying Fury. Easy build. If you're using the Joan as the primary, then you're going to go with a support-based build. 2 points into Rejuvenate. I have only 2 in Emergency Protection, and I actually went for a slightly more debuff-oriented strategy with 4 points in Disarm and 4 points in Emblazoned Shield. You could carve off 1 point of Disarm and put it in Emergency Protection. It's just a priority thing. Do you prefer the debuff of the enemy's attack, which I swarm garrisons, so I do, or do you prefer the Emergency Protection skill damage taken reduction? Either is fine. You can kind of go either way with that one. And I think that covers all of the Cav stuff, actually. Like, there's not that many different Cav combinations of talents, which, like, I guess that does simplify things, doesn't it? Now, if we go to the archers, your Zhuge Liang talent build for the open field, it's the full skill tree minus the side talents, 4 points in Venomous Sting, 3 in Razor Sharp, and also full quiver. We head on back over here, and we can get a look at what you use on your Boudica Prime. I believe it's, yeah, actually the same build. I have a slight variation here for mystery reasons, but I think you probably, yeah, actually, it's the same. Attack over there, it's attack over here. Something like this is what you end up doing, all right? And if you're using Asher Benapal as the primary, what talent combination do I have on him? Let's get a quick peek here. I actually haven't even taken him to 60. But he's got Archer and skill as well, so it's all the same. So yeah, Archer talents are actually pretty easy. If you're rallying, that's when you go in on the Archer tree, in my opinion. That's a good tree for rallying, whereas the skill tree is very much for the open field, all right? If you enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here, consider subscribing. If you want to see any of my infantry commander testing, whether it's Skippy Emilianus to see how he does in the open field, or if you want to see how William Wallace does in the open field, I have summaries of that testing. It'll be on screen right over here. And consider subscribing so you don't miss out on the next open field list that I make. When we get new commanders, I will produce a new list.